I want to talk to you quite simply today because sometimes the simple things are more necessary than some of the more doctrinal ones. And I'm taking the reading from Mark's Gospel 11, and it's starting in verse 12 when it says that the next day when they were come from Bethany, Jesus was hungry and he saw the fig tree. And because there was no fruit, you know the story, he cursed it. And the following morning in verse 20, when they passed by, they saw that the fig tree was dried up, dead. So in verse 21, Peter, calling to remembrance, said to him, Master, behold, that the fig tree which you cursed is withered away. And then we get a very interesting comment. And you know, I want to talk to you a little bit about prayer and a little bit about faith, because the comment is very simple. Jesus says in verse 23, truly I say to you, that whosoever shall say to this mountain, be removed, and be cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that these things which he says shall come to pass, shall have whatever he says. Now, it's very interesting because most people don't see the direct connection between faith and prayer. But to me, there comes a time when the two are inextricably linked. Oh yes, there can be times when we're praying in general, we do, this is the more formal type of praying, which is to pray. But Jesus here is being very specific because he's speaking about prayer with some level of authority, because he says not simply that you will cast a mountain into the sea. And by the way, he was standing on the Mount of Olives, and he was talking about the Mount of Olives being cast down into the Dead Sea, which interestingly enough, prophetically, happens when Christ returns. So there's quite some significance in Jesus referring to something, because technically this is not prophetic here, but yet in actual fact it is. But what Jesus is saying is simply not just prayer, but he says, if you speak to the mountain will move. But you have to do this in faith that it will happen. Because in verse 24, he confirms this at some length when he says, I say to you, whatsoever you desire, when you pray, believe that you will receive it, and it shall be done. Now, this is quite strong. So there comes a time, both in speaking with authority and in prayer. And the fact that Jesus is linking the two, you remember that there was a time in Matthew where the disciples had, three of them, Peter, James, and John, had been on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus, and coming down and finding the other 9 who couldn't cast out the evil spirit from the boy. And when Jesus had done it, he rebuked them. And they were saying, what's wrong? Why couldn't we do this miracle? Now, so many people question all of this, in effect, because one is they don't accept that we can do the miracles that Jesus did, but here, quite clearly, Jesus expected the 9 to do what he did. And when they couldn't, they said to him, why couldn't we do it? I think sometimes we ought to ask that question more today, because he said, why? The disciples said, why couldn't we do it? And Jesus said, oh, you of little faith. In other words, they didn't have the faith to believe that this miracle could happen.